You're on the Spot with Mande Wilkes.
Welcome to On the Spot. I'm Mande Wilkes. Before we start, I want to thank you all for so much support. I announced my congressional campaign a couple weeks ago on the show. It's been in the papers and everything before that, but I announced it on the show just a couple weeks ago. Since then, my email inbox, my Facebook has kind of blown up with support. Thank you so much. We have an interview to get to, a call-in, so we'll go back to the congressional campaign and other local, national issues. But before we get to that, we have a very important local issue. We touched on it last week. The Harley-Davidson Bike Week, which usually takes place in May, has seen a lot of drama the past few years with Horry County and the city of Myrtle Beach really doing a lot to curb bikers from coming into town because of noise and traffic and just general aggravation of the people who live here year-round. So we're trying to get bikers back in. Everybody sees the loss of business that's happened, trying to get bikers back in, and now we've run into kind of another roadblock here in Myrtle Beach. So on the phone with us today is Sonny Copeland. He lives in North Carolina, but he's been, I think, for decades now, the organizer of the Myrtle Beach Bike Week. Welcome, Sonny.
Great. How are you doing today, Mande?
I'm very good. I can hear you loud and clear. Just make sure you stay loud. Sometimes the phone-ins get a little bit where we can't hear you. So just make sure you talk loud and clear to everybody watching. So right now, the drama and the controversy seems to stem from a dating confusion with the Harley-Davidson store in Myrtle Beach kind of being behind all the controversy. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, they made an announcement that they was doing an extension of Bike Week and then put out some dates that are kind of between the Bike Week and Memorial Day weekend event, which encompasses that time. And a lot of people got the impression that Bike Week had just totally changed dates, and that's just not true.
And the impression was that it had been extended into most of May rather than just a week. Is that right? So residents were aggravated.
I would say that's a pretty good assumption of everything.
Okay. Well, where do you place blame for all the controversy? Is it with the county, or is it with the Harley-Davidson, or is it a miscommunication? Who's behind all the controversy?
Well, I think everybody has to take a tad of blame. The county has limited vending permits that started several years ago. Now the vending permits are just extremely limited, you might say, especially on the south end. We're down to 25, spread out among everybody. And, people think that, that the people come for the vendors. They don't. People come to have a great time. They enjoy coming to the Grand Strand. A lot of people that come own properties. They own timeshares, they own condos, they own homes. They rent homes from friends or just rent homes in general. They come down to have a great time, to ride and enjoy the Grand Strand, the ocean, and the areas around the Grand Strand, all the way going up to Charlotte and down into Georgetown.
Well, you mentioned about the vendor permits. I remember a few weeks ago I spoke on the show about I saw something where you said that you were trying to move the whole Bike Week event to Florence because the Florence government has been much more receptive than the local government here in Myrtle Beach. This show airs in both Florence and Myrtle Beach, so that's kind of a double-edged sword. It's kind of good news for Florence if they're going to in fact be getting that additional business, but it's bad news for those of us here in the Myrtle Beach and that are going to be losing additional business. Are you still looking to organize in Florence rather than in Myrtle Beach?
Well, we're not trying to move anything away from the Grand Strand rally itself. The Grand Strand rally is going to be going on for years to come. What we're doing in Florence is a totally different event. We're using the name Myrtle Beach Bike Week West, which is a trade name that I own. It's a motorcycle expo, and we have a concert. But we're not taking anything at all away from the Grand Strand. And a lot of businesses are to look at setting up over here at Florence at this event. This is a week before Daytona. And it's the greatest time in the world, I feel like, to advertise your business. You're getting people interested in coming back to the Grand Strand, recognizing your business before they get to Daytona and get information on what could be a dozen or hundreds of events all around the country once they start looking at all the magazines and everything else.
Well, are you hopeful that you're going to be able to work with the county about making sure these vendor permits come through, you know, for this year in Myrtle Beach?
Well, we don't set up anything down there anymore as far as any vending. The county has pretty much eliminated that for us by just eliminating vending permits where we used to set up everything. Nowadays, you know, a lot of your vending permits are at your bars, except with the Lakewood campgrounds and around the Harley shop. And on the north end, that's controlled by the city up there at Barefoot, but there's a few at Colonial Mall up there. So,
okay. Well, we're going to have to hang up. I've got a lot to talk about on the show. But Sonny, thank you so much for calling in. Do you have a website where people can maybe go and get some clarification about the dates, because there's been so much confusion?
Well, we own MyrtleBeachBikeWeek.com.
Okay.
You know, I own the business.
MyrtleBeachBikeWeek.com. Okay.
West.
Okay,
So,
MyrtleBeachBikeWeek.com. Thank you so much for calling in, Sonny. Hopefully we will be able to have you on again and have some very good news in terms of bringing business back to the Grand Strand. Thank you so much, Sonny. We will talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.
You know, that was an interesting call to me because, you know, my family business is tourism. We lost a lot when the bikers left, when they were pushed out by the city and the county government. So I'm hopeful that we can get some of that biker business back. I mean, I know, you know, a bunch of bars went bankrupt, a bunch of businesses went bankrupt, and honestly, you know, on a personal level, I don't really, bikers kind of annoy me because bikes are so loud. I have a convertible, and pretty much for the entire month of May, I'm not really, you know, using the convertible because it's too loud to put my top down. So I'm kind of personally annoyed by bikers, so I understand the aggravation. But I don't think that means that, you know, the county and the city should just be able to come in and push out a huge segment of business. So I'm hopeful we can get that back on track. The county does seem to be, you know, a little more amenable to working out the vendor permits, and the city has backed off, you know, against the bikers. So I think we're going to get it worked out. Hopefully, we'll see. May seems like a long time away, but we'll see. All right, when we come back, we'll move a little bit to some more national issues. Be right back. Welcome back. I'm Mande Wilkes. Well, right now, the U.S. is negotiating with the Taliban, which sounds crazy. It sounds like it ought to be in the Government Gone Wild segment of the show, but, you know, it's really true. It's really serious. The U.S. just a few days ago began negotiations with the Taliban in Afghanistan to try to organize a prisoner swap. Now, Afghanistan, vis-a-vis the Taliban, wants to see the U.S. pull troops out of Afghanistan and is willing to discuss a prisoner swap for that. I think also, you know, wanting the U.S. to release prisoners from Guantanamo Bay. Now, I thought that the U.S. did not negotiate with terrorists, but apparently that's not the case, because Taliban and Al-Qaeda are kind of the same to me. I mean, the U.S. government is pretending like because the military has been successful in pushing out Al-Qaeda, that ends the threat. That does not end the threat. I mean, the Taliban, to me, is about as equivalent in terms of terrorism to Al-Qaeda as you can get. So I have no idea where this negotiation with the Taliban is coming from. By the way, already the negotiations are not looking good. The Taliban is putting extreme pressure on the U.S. to do things the U.S. military doesn't want to do, so that the U.S. can release those prisoners. I don't know what's going to come of it, but I'll tell you what it did cause me to do. It caused me to look into the history of American relations with Islamic groups and that kind of thing. And do you know what I learned? It was something I never ever learned in history classes in school. I learned that all of our problems, or so many of our problems in the Mideast with Iran, started in 1953 when the U.S. overthrew a democratically elected government in Iran to replace that democratic government with a Shah, essentially a dictator that America had good relations with. Now, the people of Iran, you know, liked the government they had elected and really, really disliked the government that the U.S. installed in Iran, the dictatorship that the U.S. installed in Iran. And so since then, Iran, the Iranian people have resented America, and I think that's where we see so much of the hatred, coming from. Now, I have no idea why they're not teaching that in schools. Foreign policy is huge right now with the presidential election, fully underway, the primary season fully underway. I can't believe that we didn't learn that in school. So I think that's a cautionary tale about what can happen when the U.S. intervenes in places it has no business intervening, throwing out democratically elected governments. I mean, I thought we were exporting democracy, nation building, not nation destroying. So, I just tie it into this negotiating with the Taliban thing that we're doing now in Afghanistan. Outlandish to me. I mean, like I said, I almost feel like this should go in the government gone wild segment. Sticking a little bit with foreign policy, it was a woman right now, she's running for city council in Arizona. She's Mexican, I believe. She has been kept off the ballots in Arizona because she has proven not to speak English at a level proficient enough to where the state of Arizona says she can run for city council. Now, this is such a good example of why we need English as an official language. I support, when I go to Washington, I support an official amendment to the Constitution that English is the official language in this country. We talked about this a little bit when we had the presidential debates a couple weeks ago. It's becoming more and more evident that English as the official language is going to be really important to sort of stopping immigration, illegal immigration in its tracks. And now, to that point, a lot of the presidential candidates and a lot of, congressmen running for re-election and that kind of thing all over the country are talking about, let's deport all of the people that are here right now illegally in the country. Well, I think that is a really disingenuous position to take. I think either politicians who believe you can deport up to 20 million people are either A, delusional, or B, liars. Because consider this, Osama bin Laden, the world's biggest terrorist, the world's most wanted man, it took the U.S. a full decade to capture him. That's one man, the most wanted man in the world, a full decade to capture him. So any politician who tells you that they're going to be able to round up, 15, 20 million people at the drop of a hat and deport them, that's either A, a lie, or B, delusional. I mean, it's just not possible given our track record of, being able to find even one person and get rid of them. So I think with immigration, the most important thing we need to do is stop this delusional talk about deporting 20 million people and talk about stopping the bleeding at our borders. That's really the problem. If we didn't have the bleeding at our borders, we wouldn't have these 20 million illegal people, to decide what to do with. So stop the bleeding at our borders, make English an official language, the official language, put that as an amendment in the Constitution. And I think that's how we kind of begin to solve not completely solve, but begin to solve the immigration problem. Moving on for a minute, global warming. Now we're in the middle of, I think, the warmest winter I ever remember in all my 27 years living here. The warmest winter I ever remember. And what do I see coming out? A slew of studies about global warming not existing. A bunch of scientists released several studies this past week claiming that global warming doesn't exist. Now, I don't know if global warming exists. Nobody knows if global warming exists because, frankly, the records for meteorology and weather have only existed for like 100 years, 120 years, something like that. So you can't really create or decide on trends, eke out trends over thousands of years when you only have records for 2 or 3% of that time. So what I want to talk about with global warming is not whether it exists or whether it doesn't or anything like that, but why is this a political issue? I mean, I don't understand why, one, Democrats are so adamant that it exists, even though the science doesn't really bear it out, as this recent slew of studies shows, and I don't really understand, two, why Republicans are so adamant that it doesn't exist, even though science doesn't really, isn't really able to come up with an answer to that. I mean, Republicans kind of annoy me on this because you know, if there's anything Republicans are supposed to care about, it's supposed to be family values. And I think that being a steward of the environment is a huge, you know, important factor of that. I mean, we've heard that before. That's nothing new. So I don't understand why Democrats won't even consider it, and I don't understand why you know, liberals are just so sure it exists. It's become this political issue when really there's nothing political about it. I mean, I think we can all agree that doing what's good for the environment is the same as doing what's good for our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. I don't think it's a political issue. I think that it's become sort of the hippies versus the hardcores, and doesn't really make sense to me. Like I said, who knows if global warming exists? I don't know. I know we are sitting in the middle of, I think, the warmest winter I have ever imagined, record-setting warm winter. I'm enjoying it. I'm not complaining. I will be right back with the Government Gone Wild segment of the week. Welcome back. I'm Mande Wilkes. It's time for the Government Gone Wild segment of the week. All right, this week in Pennsylvania, a school district has banned Uggs. You know, those shoes, those boots that come up to about here and they look like something Eskimos would wear. I call them Uglies because I think they're really, really ugly. I don't know. My sister wears them and she's going to kill me when she hears me say that. But Uggs, this Pennsylvania school district has banned Uggs and other shoes like them because they say that students are hiding their cell phones in them. Now, in Pennsylvania, it's cold. I think that if there's anywhere that students should be allowed to wear boots, it's kind of weird to say allowed to wear boots, it should be in Pennsylvania where it's cold. So this Pennsylvania school district is saying students can wear Uggs, but they're going to have to take them off when they get to school. This is what this is what people are worried about in school. This is insane. So what if they hide cell phones in their Uggs? Come on, it's a cost-benefit analysis. I'd rather them not be freezing in Pennsylvania winter than you know, worry about having their cell phone. And I just realized the irony. This story comes right after we talk about global warming. So anyway, connecting the dots there. Second thing in Government Gone Wild this week is very serious. You know, nothing to laugh at. The Uggs was a kind of a lighter issue. This is very serious. The Enemy Expatriation Act is currently under consideration in Congress. Charlie Dent, a Republican, quote unquote, in Congress has proposed this law which would call for the revocation of U.S. citizenship for anybody who materially supports is the word of the statute, hostilities toward the U.S. Now, materially supports, that's not defined in the statute, but if you look to the Patriot Act, that could mean something so simple as being critical, being overly critical of the government. So, you know, on this show, even with my Government Gone Wild segment, I may qualify, you know, as materially supporting, you know, criticizing the U.S. government. It's called the Enemy Expatriation Act. Again, I'm disturbed by this for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is because it's being sponsored and introduced by a Republican. Now, what happened to civil liberties? What happened to the Constitution? I mean, the Constitution does not call anywhere for a revocation of your U.S. citizenship just because you criticize the U.S. government. In fact, if the Constitution stands for anything, it stands for being able to criticize your government without fear of retribution or without fear of having your citizenship revoked. So this is Government Gone Wild. Again, it's called the Enemy Expatriation Act. Google it at your, you know, if you wish. It's pretty scary stuff. I mean, it's very, very Orwellian, you know, 1984 stuff here. All right, I will be right back. Welcome back. I'm Mande Wilkes. All right, let's move back to some local and statewide economics for just a few minutes. Now, we hear a lot about maybe gambling coming back to well, not coming back, it never was, but gambling being legalized just for this coastal area, you know, the PD, the Myrtle Beach, Florence area. Now, of course, this is a huge controversy in Columbia right now, whether or not to allow gambling. As far as I know, there has been no legislation introduced for this session so far, but I hear a lot of talk, kind of backroom whispers, that gambling may actually be on the table to be considered, you know, to be coming here. Now, gambling. My biggest fear, first of all, let me say, I'm not a gambler. Actually, my family and I go on a cruise every year, and I hate the casino. It's annoying to me. the flashing lights and all of it just personally annoy me. I'm not a gambler, but I would like to see gambling come here. Why? For businesses. Now, the thing that does scare me about gambling coming here is that I know the government's going to tax the HE double hockey sticks out of it. And why does that scare me? That scares me because that means that the South Carolina government's going to grow. Because every time the South Carolina Department of Revenue gets more money, they grow. So that's kind of not a surprise, but I think that's an unintended consequence of gambling legalization that we really have to consider, you know, kind of weigh the cost benefit of that. So I do support gambling here on South Carolina's coast. However, with the stipulation that every penny taxed goes into a taxpayer rebate fund that's then rebated to taxpayers. It's the only way to make sure that the state government doesn't continue to grow. And so that, like I said, that could be an unintended consequence, you know, give our government more revenue to work with. You know, that's how the government always wins, because we say, let's pass laws so that business can grow, and that's great. But every time business grows, they're taxed more. And every time they're taxed more, government grows. So I want to be very careful that gambling doesn't lead to a growth in government, just a growth in business. So I think that the taxpayer rebate is the best way we can ensure kind of the best of both worlds. Let businesses, you know, come here. I think this could be a huge boom for our economy. You know, one thing we have to look at is, and especially in this part of the state, is diversification of the economy. So much of it is tourism-based, that's retail-based, so much of it. It really doesn't give you a lot of leeway when the economy shifts and changes. It gives workers here no flexibility. You know, opening the coast up to things like gambling would really diversify the economy and give people more options when the economy falters like it is now, when retail falters like it has been over the past few years. Diversification of the economy, very, very important. I see that as being something that bringing gambling to the coast could do. Second thing is moving away from this area, but toward the upstate a little bit. An Amazon facility is going to be built in Spartanburg. Now, this would be good news because obviously that's a big company, going to hire a lot of people in the upstate, you know, pay competitive wages. Amazon's known for paying competitive wages. But what bothers me about this is, why is Amazon doing this? Amazon's doing this because South Carolina gave Amazon a huge, huge tax incentive to relocate, or not to relocate, but to expand in South Carolina. That sounds good, but guess what? That shifted the tax burden onto small businesses and individuals in South Carolina. 98% of jobs are created by small businesses and individuals. So to shift a tax burden onto them even more, to shift a tax burden onto job creators even more, doesn't do a thing for joblessness in this state. In this state, again, you know, we have like 10% unemployment now. I think it's down to like 9.8% or something, but one of the highest unemployment rates in the state. So a lot of this, what we see happening with this, you know, tax incentives for big companies, while the little guy gets screwed, comes from something called command economics. Nikki Haley is a fan of command economics. She's put as her commerce secretary somebody named Bobby Hitt. He's a huge fan of command economics, and basically what it does is it allocates, command economics allocates capital through the government rather than letting the private sector and the marketplace allocate capital as it should be. And the consequence, the most direct consequence, is, you know, like I said, shifting the tax burden from, you know, large, huge corporations who can fend for themselves, if it comes down to that, to small individuals and small businesses and individuals, which in this state are, you know, 98% of the time the job creators. So command economics not working out for the state. We need to watch out for small businesses and individuals. That's who creates jobs. So while the Amazon facility in Spartanburg is good news, you know, for some people who are going to be hired in Spartanburg, it's got a domino effect behind it. It's not completely good news. You know, it's probably going to have a net loss jobs in this state when it's all said and done, because while Amazon's going to hire some people because of their tax incentive to do so, small businesses and individuals are not going to hire some people because the tax burden has been shifted onto them. So this is a prime example of what happens when the government is put in charge of the economy, when the government picks winners and losers in the marketplace, and when the government allocates capital rather than allowing the private sector to allocate capital as it should. All right, I will be right back. Welcome back to On the Spot. I'm Mande Wilkes, and I'm hot and I'm bothered, and it's not just because you decided to turn me on in your living room this morning. This morning I am hot for Representative Boyd Brown. He is a Democratic representative here in South Carolina from Winsboro. I think it's near Columbia. I've been hot for Representative Brown once before on the show. Even though he's a Democrat, he's been kind of at the forefront of pushing some very, very conservative sort of ideology in the South Carolina legislature. Today, I am hot for him because he has introduced a whole big, ethics reform. And the part that's got me hot is that he's introduced an idea that legislative sessions in South Carolina should last for 30 days, 1 year, and then the next year lasts for 60 days. Right now, every single year, the legislative session lasts a full 6 months. 6 months is way too long for those legislators to be, making laws and getting in the way of people, trampling rights in Columbia. So I think this is great. 30-day session, then a 60-day session, that's about all the time that these legislators need to get their paws, on your pocketbooks and everything else. So the one bad part about it is Representative Brown has decided he is not going to run for re-election. I think he's even younger than I am, so I guess he's got other plans, what he wants to do. But it is sad that the best legislators do tend to term limit themselves. So I would like for his Republican colleagues to take heed of what he's doing, introducing some real conservative-minded ideals, even though he's a Democrat. And I would hope that Republicans take notice of that and act like Republicans themselves. And I am bothered today by an SCRG, South Carolinians for Responsible Government, report about the top 10 overpaid educrats. Last week we heard from SCRG President Randy Page about exactly this issue. Only 44%, 44 cents of every dollar going to the classroom. The rest going toward educrat salaries, administrative salaries, bureaucrats, everything but students and teachers. So SCRG has released a list of the top 10 overpaid educrats. These people are making, $150,000, $200,000, $250,000 when teachers themselves are making on average $47,000 in this state. So I am bothered by these overpaid educrat, bureaucrats, and that's it. All right, that's it for this week's show. Next week, same time, same place. Keep turning me on, and I'll keep turning you on. Till then, I'm at mandewilkes.com.